You finally got some time to yourself. There's nothing urgent. Nobody needs anything from you. There's no meetings you need to be in. There's no email to check. No immediate problem to solve. And within less than a few minutes, you're checking your phone. You're checking your email. You're feeling like your phone is in your pocket going off. Maybe you're even thinking about work, remembering something that you need to do. Your body has stopped working, but your mind hasn't. It's still on. And it's a feeling a lot of high achievers or high performers, they know incredibly well. We spend years wishing we had more time. And then when we finally get some or get it, we don't really know how to be in it or what to do with it. So in this video, I'm going to explore with you why people find it hard to switch off. And it probably has much less to do with being busy than you really think. We're going to explore a very counterintuitive way of helping those high performers actually switch off. Because underneath all that thinking and doing, something else is actually really going on. But first, the first thing we need to acknowledge is that being switched on has probably served you really, really incredibly well. Look, it's not a weakness, and it never has been a weakness. Like, you're successful partly or probably because you notice a lot of different things. You think ahead in front of a lot of different people. You anticipate problems, you make decisions, you take responsibility. When something goes wrong, you don't sit around hoping that somebody or something else will fix it. You actually get in and do it. You do something about it. And you've probably been rewarded on more than one occasion for that behavior for maybe, let's say, 20 or 30 years. It's now hard-coded. So every time you solve the problem, it reinforced it over and over and over again. So every time you worked harder and you got the result and the outcome that you wanted, you reinforced that inside your mind. Every time everybody else was, let's say, panicking and you were the person who could think clearly and you came to a solution again, you reinforced it. So your brain learned something incredibly, incredibly useful over all those years, which was being switched on works and it gets me somewhere. And it does until you actually want to switch it off. And this is where it gets rather interesting inside humans, because eventually something you were very, very good at and it rewarded you very, very well quietly became something that you probably don't know how to stop doing. And it's now in the way. And there's a huge difference between, let's say, I can perform at a high level and I need to perform at a high level. From the outside, they actually look really, really different to most people. Internally, though, they are completely different experiences from opposite ends. One is about, let's say, capability. The other has become part of who you think that you are. And you usually don't discover the difference while you're performing or optimizing or doing all the shit, right? You discover it when you stop or when you're on holidays or when you burn out. So think about what happens when there's genuinely nothing to do for you. You may sit down and almost immediately the mind starts to go. It starts producing something. Did I send that email? Did I return that call? What am I doing tomorrow? My leg is moving. Should I be doing something? I should probably check this or check that. What happens if I forget this? Or maybe I should watch a podcast or watch another video. What did you learn when, this person said this or that? Well, maybe I should look into this. I've been meaning to research, further into that. Or these days, let's get onto AI and do some more stuff, right? So even when you're being mindful and meditating, we're also analyzing the effectiveness of that stuff. Like, am I relaxed enough or am I centered enough? So even in the stuff we're doing for mindfulness, we're actually doing stuff in it. And because, you're intelligent, every one of those thoughts sounds completely reasonable. And it is, right? And that is the difficult part. Your mind doesn't, jump at you and say, look, Greg, I'm uncomfortable sitting here doing nothing. So I'm going to manufacture something for you to really think about. Because you know what? If I have nothing to do, it leads somewhere else. But it gives you something that appears genuinely important, and that's the trick. So off you go again, thinking and doing and, let's say, solving, planning this, analyzing stuff. There is so much that your mind will get you to do just to occupy yourself. But here's the question I think is much more interesting in this space. What would happen if you didn't follow that thought? What would happen if you explored that thought instead? Not to stop it, not to control it, not to meditate it away. Just don't automatically go where it wants you to take you. Be curious. What's underneath that thought or the need to do this? Because I think we make a mistake when we talk about overthinking. We actually think or assume that thinking is the problem. So we try to stop the thought or thinking. And that's not how humans work. Like, good luck telling, a highly intellectual person not to think. Or you've done meditations, right? Stop thinking through meditations. It is not going to happen, right? It doesn't. But what if the thinking isn't actually the beginning of the problem? What if there's something that's happening or happened before that thought? Maybe it's a feeling, a tiny moment of discomfort, maybe uncertainty, restlessness, something that you noticed but didn't consciously register. And then the intellect arrived afterwards and gave you something that it usually does, which is to do something with it. Now, that's the interesting part. Because instead of asking, how do I stop this thought? Or how do I stop thinking? You can then be curious and you can ask something like this. What is all that thinking trying to resolve? And they're very different questions. They're completely different questions. So this happens in decision making all the time. You can have a decision you've, let's say, thought about for days on end, and it's quite an important decision. You've done all the spreadsheets, you've spoken to all the people, you've looked at the upside of stuff, the risks, the downside of stuff. You've looked at all the data, the governance, the opportunity around it. You've got more information than any reasonable human being could possibly have or need in that space. And yet you're still thinking about the decision itself. So the question is, why are you still thinking about that? And at that point, understand this, more information probably isn't going to make the issue or the decision any easier, right? It's not going to help it. Something else hasn't resolved in this space. But because thinking has been your most successful asset and tool, you keep applying the same thing to the same problem, a different angle, or I've missed something, another conversation, another piece of information, or another piece of data that's out there, maybe another night, lying awake, running the same thing through your head over and over and over again. The systems and tools that solve thousands of problems for you and made you very successful in your life, the problem is it's now being applied to something it may not be very capable of actually solving. And that's the issue. And this is where high achievers they can actually get really, really trapped, because thinking has felt productive for you for so many years and it's been highly successful. Like, you can be lying in bed at midnight, doing absolutely nothing externally, and you could still feel like you're working on something at the same time. You haven't made a decision yet. Like, literally nothing has changed at all, but you've been very, very, very busy inside that head of yours, analyzing things. That's why overthinking can be so seductive for the intelligent people, because it absolutely feels like progress, because it is progress previously. But sometimes you're not moving towards an answer. You're just circling the same perception over and over and over again. And that's a very, very, very different thing. So there's another part of switching off that I think is even probably more interesting than that. That is what happens when you actually do stop. So no phone, no work, no podcast, no book, no lessons, no television, no courses, no learning, nothing to improve, nothing to achieve, right? Just you. For some people, that feels liberating. It feels free and it feels fantastic. But for a lot of high performing people, a lot of leaders and people who work in business, it is surprisingly uncomfortable. And I don't think it's because you're bad at relaxing. Like, you go on holidays and take your laptop and you're doing work on your holidays. You can't switch off. And I think it's because doing has been giving you something besides results. It's been giving you an identity about who you are as a person. And that's the deeper part. And it's the part you need to understand. It's saying things like, I'm capable, I'm useful, I'm needed, I'm respected. I'm the person people come to if there's an issue. I'm the person who knows what to do. I'm the person who can solve this or handle this. Nobody else can. And there's nothing really inherently wrong with any of those, things in general. But after enough years, something subtle can happen from those spaces. And that is, performance stops being something that you actually do, and it starts becoming someone you believe you have to be to survive. And that's when switching off becomes incredibly difficult, near impossible, because what you're actually, what exactly are you switching off? Is it work, or is the person you've spent decades becoming? And this is where I think a lot of our, let's say, high performance advice around burnout and switching off completely misses the mark, or something altogether, right? They will optimize things. They will take a holiday. They'll, turn your phone off, set boundaries, less social media, meditate, exercise, get more sleep, all relatively general, but also, somewhat useful. But you can take you can't take the high performer on holiday, and you can put them beside the swimming pool. You can take away the laptop. You can put a cocktail in their hand, but that person is still there. The identity came on holiday with them. Just because you took away the tools doesn't mean it's taken away the problem. So you can take a holiday from work, but it's much harder to take a holiday from who you think you have to be when it's part of your identity. That's the deeper issue. So I don't think the answer is learning how to force yourself to, let's say, relax. That's just another task or thing to optimize or do, right? Which you'll just analyze anyway. Another thing to just get right for yourself, or another performance that you want to look good for. I think the interesting move is probably much, much smaller than you think. And again, this is all about awareness. So start noticing the moment before you switch yourself back on. That tiny gap. You finally sit down and your hand reaches for your phone or your email or whatever, and just notice it. You wake up at 2 a.m. and your mind offers you a business problem. Just notice it. You're walking somewhere and suddenly feel the need to put a podcast on in your ears. Again, notice it. Not because of any of those things are actually wrong. So don't turn this into another fucking self-help improvement exercise, okay? Just become curious. What was there immediately before I needed to do something like I just suggested? That's where the interesting information is. That's the curiosity. Not necessarily inside the thought, but before it. Because once you can see that moment, something else starts changing. You're no longer completely inside the pattern at this stage. You've shifted and you're observing it. And that's a very, very different place to be in. So maybe switching off isn't really about stopping your mind at all. Maybe it's about no longer automatically believing that every thought requires your participation and optimization or performance. No longer assuming that every feeling requires some kind of fixing, or every uncertainty requires some kind of answer. Every empty hour needs some kind of feeling of stuff, right? Every moment of your life needs something productive or for you to produce something, because eventually you might discover something underneath all of this activity, which is the person who was there before all of this performance, before the job, before the titles, before everybody needed you to know, to what to do, right? Before everyone came to you for what to do, before being useful became so valuable to yourself. And maybe that's the real reason switching off feels so difficult, because you've spent years learning how to become the person who can handle pretty much almost anything. But nobody ever taught you what to do when there's literally nothing to handle. And perhaps that's the next thing that's worth seeing with curiosity. Not how do I switch off, which is the logical brain talking, but something much deeper, which is who is the I that find switching off so difficult.